Then we'll try this again. Good evening. Much better. My name is Matt Mayberry. I am Vice Chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, and we are thrilled that you're here. And you took time out to come and meet the candidates and listen to them. It's important for us, it's important for our state, and important for our country. What we'd like to do on behalf of the New Hampshire Republican Party is invite you to please stay involved after February 9th. Please don't go home. Please stay involved. How many of you would like to have a governor, a Republican governor, back in Concord? That was kind of weak, so we're going to try that again. Who wants to retake the governor's office? There we go. How many of you want to keep Kelly out in the U.S. Senate? Perfect. The only way that can happen is if you stay involved. Please. Find your candidates, support them, work hard for them. You're all here to listen to Carly Fiorina, who is one of the best, most dynamic, most energizing speakers we have as candidates running for president right now. How many of you have a smartphone or an iPhone? Excellent, that's a lot of you. How many of you are on Facebook? How many of you are on Twitter? Well, during today, please take out your phone, take a picture, tell your friends that you're in Exeter, New Hampshire, listening to Carly Fiorina. Take the selfies, don't keep it in your pocket, pull them out. And do this because your voice can amplify. I take one picture, 10,000 people will see that picture. Please do the same. Because if you like Carly's message, she needs you to step up and work and help with that. Please. So don't be shy, get a selfie afterwards. During her speech, just plug the camera and take a few pictures. We'd love to have her there. So, thank you so much. Thanks for coming out. Carly is great. I heard her today in Dover, and I've heard her a few other times. You're in for a real treat. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Frank Ferraro come up. And there he is. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. And aptly so, this gentleman is a World War II veteran, so he's like So, sir, what's your name? What's your name?
Manuel.
Manuel, thank you. Thank you for your service.
Manuel.
Well, thank you for your service, sir. Thank you so much. This is all for you, so thank you. Right here. So, are you folks ready to hear Carly Fiorina this evening? Yeah! So, it's cold outside, but it's going to be warm in here, so let's try that again. Are you ready to hear one of the most dynamic leaders the Republican Party is bringing forward this evening, Carly Fiorina? Excellent. All right, so let's get the show on the road. Frank, this is all yours.
So that's anti-climactic. Thanks. Thank you and welcome. For those of you from out of town, welcome to Exeter, New Hampshire, the true birthplace of the Republican Party. And I'm sure most of you know that in 1860, before he was elected the first Republican president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln came to Exeter to visit his son, Robert Todd, who was going to school right up the street at the Phillips Exeter Academy. And then he came to this very hall and gave a speech. So we're very proud of Exeter. We're very proud of our Republican heritage in town. You know, when Carly Fiorina graduated from college, times are sort of like now. It's tough for a new college graduate to get a job. So she took a job as a secretary in a real estate office. She went on to get her master's in business and landed a job with AT&T. And she worked her way up through the ranks. And When AT&T decided they wanted to spin off Lucent Technologies, they went to Carly and recognized her talents and her leadership skills and asked her to head up that activity. And it wasn't long after that that the board of directors of Hewlett-Packard came to her and asked her to take over the reins of that struggling company. And Carly Fiorina became the first woman CEO of a Fortune 50 company. Not a Fortune 500, a Fortune 50 company. And through her leadership, HP became the largest technology company in the world. After she left HP, and I'm sure she'll tell you about the story of leaving HP, she didn't just sit back and retire. She became the head of 2 charitable international organizations, and the then CIA director asked her to head up, using her technology experience, to head up the CIA's External Advisory Committee. And through that, she was given the highest security clearance that a civilian can be given. And with her technology background, I guarantee you one thing. She did not pass any classified emails through an HP laptop sitting in her basement. So I'm going to wrap up, but I wanted to borrow something from my friend Jeff Chichester and put my little spin on it. You know, we have a Republican candidate who is known as Mr. Anti-Political Correctness. And I think you know who that is. And I think we're all pretty well fed up with the degree of political correctness. You can't wear Halloween costumes anymore. You have to be careful of microaggressions. You might offend somebody. And we have to have safe zones on college campuses so students won't get their feelings hurt. But there is one PC thing that I am firmly behind, and I'm asking you to join me in supporting this PC thing, and that's President Carly. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce Carly Fiorina.
Well, good evening, Exeter. Happy New Year. I have to tell you, I just love New Hampshire for so many reasons, but how cool is this to be holding a town hall in the historic Exeter Town Hall where Abraham Lincoln spoke? That is cool. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. And thank you for that fantastic introduction. We might have to take you on the road. I have to thank the people of New Hampshire for actually quite a lot. I have to thank you for showing up here tonight. I know it's not quite as cold as last night, but still, it's early on in the new year. But I also have to thank you for taking me seriously, honestly, and giving me a shot. You know, when I launched my candidacy on May 4th of 2015, I was 17 out of 16. Candidates, that is. I say 17 out of 16 because the pollsters didn't even ask my name. And they didn't ask my name because only 3% of you had ever heard of me. And so the polls and the pundits and the media, everybody just wrote me off and said, you can't do this. But the people of New Hampshire, I have learned, take your citizenship pretty seriously. And you take your First in the Nation primary responsibilities pretty seriously. And so I've learned you don't much pay attention to the polls or the pundits, or who has how much money. You actually show up in town halls, and you showed up for me in living rooms, and dining rooms, and diners, and backyards from May 4th until today. And so here I am, tied with a couple governors who've been in politics all their life, who've spent tens of millions of dollars on television. I feel pretty good about where I am, and that's thanks to you. So thank you. I have to thank the people of New Hampshire for one other thing. Because actually it was here in New Hampshire that I first started thinking seriously about running for the presidency. You see, I was giving a speech. I was giving a speech at a Rotary Club at the Seacoast. It was in the summer of 2014. It wasn't a political speech. Before I gave the speech, I sat down at a table to eat lunch with the Rotarians, and this gentleman sat down next to me in a slightly hostile tone. He said, "I don't think I'm going to agree with you about anything." And I said, "Well, why is that, sir?" He said, "Well, I'm a Democrat." I said, "Well, you might listen and see what you think." So I gave a speech. I gave a speech about human potential, about the reality that every individual has more potential than they realize usually, that human potential is the only limitless resource we have, and it is the only resource we need to solve every problem and take advantage of every opportunity if we leverage it, if we focus it, if we believe in it. And at the end of that speech, this man came up to me and he said, "Amen." But he also said something else. He said, "You know, Carly, we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore." And that really hit me. Because this has always been a nation of limitless possibility. And when we don't think of ourselves that way anymore, we are losing something really important. We are losing the core of who we are. And so I started to think about why that is and what we must do about it. You see, this has been a nation of limitless possibility. We're not a perfect nation, but we are an exceptional nation. And this nation has been a place where more things have been more possible for more people, from more places in different circumstances than anywhere else on earth. This is a nation that has always said, yes, we can do something, when other nations said it can't be done. This is a nation that has always focused on and achieved what could be, what should be. We've never settled for what is just because it's been that way a long time. This is a nation that has always valued merit over privilege, and that's unique in the world. We have valued hard work over entitlement, and we've said yes when others have said no. This is a country that has been a place of limitless possibility for me. I know, having traveled and lived and worked all over the world for decades, done business, done charity, done policy work, I know that it is true that it only here could a young woman start out the way I did, typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a deep recession at the end of the 70s, go on one day to lead what we turned into the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible in this great nation. I have to also tell you that throughout the course of my life, there have been a lot of people who've said to me, just settle down. Don't rock the boat. Sit down and be quiet. Don't challenge the system. Don't challenge the status quo. Just settle for the way things are. And I have to tell you, I have rejected that advice every single day of my life. I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I think the American people have been told to settle for too long. I think the American people are being told and have been told for quite too long now to sit down and be quiet. Don't challenge the way things are, accept the way they are. Don't challenge the system, accept the system. But why are we accepting the way things are? Why are we settling for a nation where record numbers of men are out of work? Why are we settling for a nation where record numbers of women live in poverty? Why are we settling for a nation where young people don't know anymore whether the American dream applies to them? Why are we settling for a nation where working families' wages have been stagnant for decades now? Why are we settling for a nation where every single day we destroy more small businesses than we create? And that's a big problem now, because small businesses are the job creators of this nation. Small and family-owned businesses create 2/3 of the new jobs. They employ half the people. Most people start the way I did, in a little, small, family-owned company. My husband Frank, who some of you have met, started out driving a tow truck for a family-owned auto body shop. Why are we settling for all of these things I just mentioned, while at the same time the rich are getting richer, the powerful are getting more powerful, and the well-connected are getting better connected? Why are we settling for a government that no longer serves the people who pay for it? Our government doesn't serve us anymore, ladies and gentlemen. It serves itself. It protects itself. It nurtures itself. It nourishes itself. Our federal government has grown into a vast, bloated, inept, incompetent, corrupt bureaucracy that can't keep our nation safe. That isn't caring for our veterans, that isn't securing our border. It goes on and on. You know, the American people have a lot of common sense and good judgment. I bank on that every single day. And the American people have figured all this out. 75% of us think the federal government is corrupt. 80% of us think we have a professional political class that cares more about its power, privilege, and position than on getting anything done. Why are we settling for? Why are we settling for politics where we talk about the same things over and over and over and over every election, but nothing really changes? Why are we settling for politicians that say one thing in the drawing rooms of Manhattan, one thing's in the cornfields in Iowa, say and do whatever they please to get elected, and then do exactly what they please after they're in office? Why are we settling for the fact that the establishment, the political class, the media actually has decided that they know who you ought to vote for? They're trying to decide that they winnow the field. No, they don't. They don't decide who gets what time on a debate stage. You decide who leaves New Hampshire. I don't know about you, but I'm angry. I'm angry and I'm tired of it. And I think most Americans are angry as well. I think most Americans, too many Americans, feel powerless now. Powerless to control their futures. Powerless to cut this government down to size and hold it accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for the presidency of the United States because I know every single problem we have can be solved. All our wounds can be healed. But we can only do this if we remember who we are. Ours was intended to be a citizen government. We cannot solve these problems unless we have a leader who is prepared to restore power to the people. I am running for the presidency of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, because I think as citizens it is time. It is time to take our future back. It is time to take our government back. It is time to take our politics back. Citizens, it is time to take our country back. That is why I have rolled out my blueprint, a blueprint to take our country back. These are not the only things we have to do, but these are the first and most important things we have to do to actually cut our government down to size and hold it accountable, to actually get our economy going and growing again, to restore possibilities to this nation, to keep this nation safe and to lead in the world. We can talk about each of these in more detail during Q&A, but just to start at the top, how often have politicians talked to you about reforming the tax code? How long have we been talking about this? 30 years at least. And yet it never happened. And today, what do we have? A 73,000-page tax code. Now let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, 73,000 pages, nobody understands that. As the CEO of an almost $90 billion company, I could hire, and I did, armies of lawyers and accountants and lobbyists to help figure out how to make all that complexity work. But the 9-person real estate firm can't. My husband Frank and I have been fortunate in our lives, so we can hire an accountant to do our taxes. We hand our taxes off, we get them back, I close my eyes, I sign, I pray. I don't have a clue, and most Americans don't. My dad, I have to pause for a second and say that my dad was a professor of law, and he taught tax law. And I used to say to him, I adored my dad. He wrote books about tax law, and I would try and read them. I said, Daddy, it's so boring. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Carly, the tax code is how government exercises power. And that's right. And guess what? All this complexity, the complexity of 73,000 pages of tax code, the complexity of 86,000 pages of new regulations in the last 12 months alone. All of that complexity favors whom? The big, the powerful, the wealthy, the well-connected. Because only the big, powerful, wealthy, well-connected, and the special interests that revolve around them can handle all that complexity. So we crush the small and the powerless. The reason we have to go from a 73,000 page tax code down to 3 pages, ladies and gentlemen, is to level the playing field between the big, the powerful, the small, and the powerless, because guess what? Everybody can understand 3 pages. And you get there by lowering every rate and closing every loophole. Now, the politicians and the pundits and the experts have told me, the media has told me, you can't get that done. Actually, there's been a plan to go to a 3-page tax code for 20 years. But you know, it never gets done in Washington. Why do you suppose that is? How many oxes do you think will get gored when we go from 73,000 pages down to 3? You talk about challenging the system, challenging the status quo, that's a challenge. We can get that done. I'm going to tell you in a minute how you're going to help me get that done. But guess what happens if we finally pass the 20-year-old tax plan for 3 pages? Guess what happens when we do that? We don't need quite as many IRS agents, do we? We can replace the IRS with something a little leaner and more effective, can't we? Did you know? Yes, you can. Did you know that today we have more IRS agents than FBI and CIA combined? Does that strike you as a problem? In dangerous times, you bet it's a problem. And that's why the number 2 item on this list is to go to something called zero-based budgeting. That's a fancy term. Let me tell you what that really means. Ask yourself a question. How is it possible that the federal government spends more money each and every year? The federal government has been spending more of your money each and every year for 50 years. Under Republicans and Democrats alike. It's always more, it's always more, it's always more, and yet the government never has enough money to do the important things. Every time a problem is presented, well, we need more money. How's that possible? Because the way the government budgets is, let's say you're a government bureaucrat and you have a budget. Once you have that budget, you own that money. You never get it back. Nobody can touch it. And so all these government bureaucracies, all they do is go to Congress and ask for more money. Now, contrast that with how you budget, how I budget. How every business, every school, every nonprofit, every church or synagogue budgets. How do you budget at home? You examine every dollar. You can cut any dollar. You can move any dollar. And that's how, when you have to, you manage to spend less overall and yet have enough to invest in what you consider your priorities. The way you budget at home is called zero-based budgeting. And we have to change how the government takes your money, and we have to change how the government spends your money. We got to go to zero-based budgeting. Now, how am I going to get that done? Might surprise you to know there's been a bill for zero-based budgeting sitting on the floor of the U.S. House. It's been there for a long time. How come it's not getting voted on? Because think about all the oxes that are going to get gored. Now, how am I going to ask your help to get this done? Ours was intended to be a citizen government. Every week I will go into the Oval Office and I will ask you to take out your device of choice. Smartphone device, that is. If you own a flip phone, I'd suggest you upgrade. Literally, I will say to you, my fellow citizens, do you think it's finally time that we pass that 20-year-old bill for a 3-page tax code? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there is an app for citizen government. Technology is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used to focus pressure on the political class. It is the only way we change the system, is put power back in the hands of the people. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. I will ask you over and over again, because we know that pressure works on politicians. And when 75% of you agree with me that the federal government is corrupt, I'm perfectly willing to bet on the fact that you're going to press 1 for yes and 2 for no. There are other things we have to do in this blueprint. We have to finally repeal Obamacare for so many reasons. We need to replace it with something that will work, and I hope you'll ask me in Q&A specifically what that is. One of the reasons, by the way, we have to repeal Obamacare is not just that it's not working, but buried in the pages of Obamacare is the takeover of the student loan business by the federal government. So what most young people don't understand is the federal government owns the student loan business now. And the federal government has decided that for every student loan, a student must pay between 4.5% and 6.5% on that loan. And meantime, the government pays between 1.5% and 2.5% on its debt. So what does that tell you, ladies and gentlemen? The federal government is making money off of our young people. Does that strike you as a racket? It's because it is. The government should not be in the student loan business, just like the government shouldn't be in the healthcare business. We have to restore the character of our nation by serving our veterans, by standing for life and the God-given gifts of every individual, by protecting religious liberty that is under assault in this nation. We have to finally get around to securing our borders and enforcing a pro-American immigration system. How long have we been talking about that? 25 years. And we have to lead again in the world and defeat ISIS. It is dangerous and delusional for Mrs. Clinton and President Obama to be talking about climate change and gun control in the wake of Paris and San Bernardino. No, climate change is not on the national security threat. We can do all this. We can solve these problems. But of course, first we have to start by defeating Hillary Clinton. We're not going to defeat Hillary Clinton by nominating someone who routinely insults women and everyone else. We're not going to defeat Hillary Clinton with a politician who says whatever they want. We're not going to defeat Hillary Clinton with someone who's never made an executive decision in their life and shows up for work 40% of the time. We're not going to defeat Hillary Clinton with someone who isn't tough enough to have the fight. Now, whether you've made up your mind or not to support me, and I know you New Hampshireites take your citizenship seriously, and I respect that. And so I've met a lot of people in New Hampshire who say to me, it's only the first time I've seen you. It's only the second time I've seen you. I gotta see you 3 times, then I'll make up my mind. I mean, I get it, I respect it, I really do. But whether you're ready to support me or not, in your heart of hearts, you know you cannot wait to see the debate between Hillary Clinton and Carly Fiorina. You know why you know it? You know know why you applaud? You know why you can't wait to see that debate? Because you know what's going to happen. I will win. And we have to start by winning. Let me tell you who we have to nominate and elect. We have to nominate someone who can beat Hillary Clinton. We have to nominate someone who can unify this party and then unify this country, because we have to work together to solve these pressing problems. Not by sacrificing their principles, but by explaining how these principles work best to lift people up. We have to elect somebody who actually understands how the economy works so that we can get it going and growing again. We need to elect someone who understands how the world works and who's in it. I know our allies personally. I know our adversaries, many of them personally. I know our intelligence and our military capability. And ladies and gentlemen, we are reminded day after day after day right now that when the United States of America does not lead, the world becomes a very dangerous, tragic place. And when this nation does not respond to provocation, whether it is a terrorist attack in Benghazi or a cyber attack on Sony Pictures by North Korea, what do we get? More and more dangerous and provocative behavior. We need to elect a president who understands bureaucracies, because our government has grown into one gigantic, bloated, corrupt, inept bureaucracy, and only someone who understands that is going to cut it down to size and help hold it accountable. She must understand technology. And no, Mrs. Clinton, you don't wipe the server with a towel. You see, technology is an incredibly important and powerful tool to restore power to the people. But it is also a weapon that is being wielded against us by our enemies. And we must have a president who understands how to fight back. But maybe the most important thing of all is we need to elect a leader. What is a leader? A leader is someone who is willing to stand up and make a tough call in a tough time and be held accountable. There's a big difference between a manager and a leader. A manager accepts the way things are. It's not that managers are bad people, not at all. It's just they accept the way things are. They operate within the system. They don't challenge the status quo. A leader knows their highest calling is to challenge the status quo, because that's the only way you solve festering problems. But the most important thing to remember about leadership is this, and it's something I learned a long time ago, although I didn't realize it at the time. I used to think, when I was a secretary, I used to think that a leader was someone with a big office, a big title, the best parking space, the perks. And then I got older and wiser, and I learned that there were people with big offices, big titles, big egos, who were not leading. You see, leadership isn't about how big your office is, even if it's an oval one. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. I believe it is my highest calling to restore citizen government to this great nation. I believe in the common sense and good judgment of the American people. And I believe in your courage and your fortitude and your wisdom as well. And so I will ask you tonight and every day for the next 34 days, support me, join me, help me, vote for me. Citizens, it is time to take our future back. It is time to take our government back. It is time to take our politics back. Citizens, it is time to take our country back. Okay, who has a question? Yes, sir. Uh-oh, I get nervous when they start reading them.
Among people, and it will continue to be shown. So I think back about, in my lifetime, I've seen 2 presidential elections that have been real landslides in the Electoral College. 99 and 93%. But in those same elections, the popular vote, the one we call the loser, still received votes from about 41 and 38% of the Americans who voted. So how would you visualize your presidency in terms of over a third of the country? Well, who knows, you could get 99% of the popular, you probably will, but let's suppose that it's like any of the other landslides. How would your presidency deal with the fact that there are over a third, and close to a half in a lot of elections, of people who are strongly in favor of someone else?
Well, I think the question you're asking, and it's a really important question, I think the question you're asking is how do we unify the nation? Because after the elections are over, we have to unify the nation to solve our problems. And unfortunately, some politicians and some people running for office major on division. I always start with where we have common ground. Where do we have common ground? We have common ground in the fact that Americans have figured out the system isn't working anymore. Americans know something has gone profoundly wrong in this nation. Americans know the country is on the wrong track. Think about those numbers that I gave you. 75% of Americans believe the federal government is corrupt. What does that tell you? It's Republicans, it's Democrats, it's independents, it's young, it's old, it's men, it's women. 80% of us think we have a professional political class of both parties that cares more about the protection of its own privilege and power than on getting anything done. Think about that. It's Democrats, Republicans, independents, it's men, it's women, it's young, it's old. Why did that Democrat, and I have a lot of Democrats that show up at my events. Maybe some of you are Democrats here, you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. But the point is, there are so many things that we agree on in this nation. We agree that every individual has God-given gifts. We know as Americans that power dispersed into the hands of the many is more competent, more compassionate, more wise and just than power concentrated in the hands of the few. It is one of the most enduring principles of this nation. So I'm going to go back to where we have common ground, what this nation is intended to be. And I am quite certain that when I ask Americans to press 1 for yes and 2 for no, it's not just going to be Republicans who are voting that finally we have to redo our immigration system so that it works for our nation. It's not just going to be Republicans who say, heck yes, we ought to know where our money's being spent. These are American problems, and the American people will step up and respond if offered a solution in good faith, which restores the values of this nation.
We've gotten the vote, and I say we meaning women, and I speak as a woman, obviously. I just think that both Democrats and Republicans say they're working on getting wages equal for equal, equal work, equal pay. I'm frankly very tired of waiting. I'd like to know your feelings, your thoughts about that.
So, let me tell you a story to try and answer the question about how I think about this. Of course, I started as a secretary, and I worked my way up in, honestly, completely male-dominated fields. Communications, technology. Why did I have that opportunity? Because people looked at what I produced. In other words, they focused on merit. When I came to Hewlett-Packard imagined itself a very progressive company. And like many companies, you remember, the young people from here for sure will, but remember, I don't know, maybe a year ago, Apple and Google said, wow, we're not as diverse as we thought we were. Wow, we haven't made as much progress as we thought. Well, we had that situation in Hewlett-Packard. We had a typical situation where we had a pretty diverse workforce that would enter, you know, pretty 50-50, men and women, all different kinds of people. And then somehow at middle management, they'd all go away. And by the time we got up to the top of the pile, we didn't have a very diverse senior executive staff. It happens in a lot of companies. And so I said, okay, we're going to change the process by which we evaluate talent. And long story short, by the time I left, half of my direct reports were women. You see, when you focus, not because I had quotas for them, but because I focused on merit and who could do the job, not who knows who, not how long has somebody been there. The reason I say focus on merit is because seniority systems disadvantage women, actually. Who has seniority systems? The government? Unions? What do seniority systems reward? Not merit. Seniority systems reward what? Time in grade. And that disadvantages women greatly, because women sometimes come to the workforce later, or they leave the workforce for a time. If you can create a situation where all that matters is what you produce, what you contribute, what your merit is, then you will achieve equal pay for equal work. Now I'm going to say one last thing to you. Hillary Clinton loves to talk about women's issues, and she also loves to talk about the historic nature of her candidacy. Sorry, Hillary, me too. I'm not going to ask for your support because I'm a woman. I'm going to ask for your support because I'm the most qualified candidate to do this job. But I have to say, as a woman, and women are 53% of the vote now, as a woman, I resent when Democrats talk about women's issues. As 53% of this nation, every issue is a woman's issue. You care about health care and education and debts and deficits and national security. Actually, we love our guys, but we're not a special interest group. We're the majority. Now, why do I bring this up? Because I think Hillary Clinton has demonstrated the height of hypocrisy on this issue. She continues to back people who pay women on a seniority basis. And I challenge you to go look in her campaign reports. And what you will find is she does not pay women equal to men. You look at how she pays her campaign and who's on her campaign staff, and how I pay my campaign people and who's on my campaign staff, and you will see the difference between a candidate who recognizes merit and pays for it, no matter what shape it's in, and someone who just talks about it.
Carly, I applaud your talk about leadership and recognizing and empowering and bringing out the best in everybody. And the zero-based budgeting, a wonderful idea. What about zero-based regulations?
Yeah, what a good idea.
Talk on that, please.
So I said that one of the things we have to do is repeal Obamacare. We have to repeal Obamacare because it's not working, because it's, I don't know, maybe 60,000 pages of gobbledygook that nobody understands. But that's the start, not the finish. In 2015, 86,000 pages of new regulation rolled out of Washington. Year after year after year, tens of thousands of pages of regulation has rolled out of Washington. Now, it is undoubtedly true that more has rolled out faster under President Obama than has been true for a long time. But it is also true that we have never rolled back regulation for at least 50 years. Republicans talk about it all the time. Let me ask you a question. Can you think of a single regulation that has been repealed in the last 40 years? You can't. Have we ever? I mean, Ronald Reagan repealed the 55-mile-an-hour national speed limit. Good, good. Ronald Reagan deregulated the trucking industry. Good. Ronald Reagan deregulated the airline industry. Good. We haven't done much deregulation since then, have we? And think about this. We're not a nation of laws anymore. We're a nation of rules. Rules, rules, rules. The EPA, the NLRB, the FCC, you go on and on, 86,000 pages of rules. Who are the rule makers? Who are these people? They are not elected. They are not accountable. They are nameless, faceless bureaucrats. And it spews out of Washington, D.C. So, yes, we have to start rolling back. Let's start with Obamacare, but we got to do something else. I will conduct a top-to-bottom review of every single regulation on the books. And we will start rolling back. One last thing. I'm going to ask for your help on press 1 for yes, 2 for no. There's a bill sitting in Congress. It's called the REINS Act, and you know what it would do? It would force Congress to be held accountable for every regulation that rolls out. If somebody proposes a regulation, it would put your elected representatives on the hook. Vote for it, stand up, be accountable. What's the impact? We need to pass that because our lawmakers, our representatives have to be accountable for the rules. We have to be a nation of laws once again, not a nation of rules. So press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Where is the lady with the mic? I think she's zipping around here. Okay, sorry. I don't know how to get it upstairs. Maybe you can shout from upstairs, and then I'll come down to you, sir. It's okay, Sarah. I think we got it. You're loud enough.
Thank you. I really appreciate your focus on corruption. I think we all look at Washington, D.C., and we think cesspool, frankly. Your focus are policy solutions. And I wonder if there are some structural issues as well. Our political system is based, is it not, on a system in which career politicians perpetuate themselves in office by taking money from the same interests they regulate. We have a Congress whose approval rating is between 25 and 30%, yet between 85 and 95% of them are elected every single time. What about the structural decay in that system?
Well, your comments suggest a couple things. Number one, term limits. Good idea. Good idea. One for yes, 2 for no. Term limits would be a good idea. As I said, this blueprint is not everything we have to do. It's what we have to start by doing. Because when you change how Washington takes your money, and you change how Washington spends your money, those are big structural reforms. And yes, term limits would add to that as well. Holding lawmakers accountable for every rule that rolls out of Washington. All of these are structural reforms. And let me just pause and say this. Why am I so confident that press 1 for yes, 2 for no is going to work? Why can I say that with such confidence? Because you actually have demonstrated enormous power in this citizen government, but we don't keep at it. Remember the scandal at the VA in Arizona, remember? And we learned that veterans had died before they received an appointment. And that bureaucrats were cooking the books so nobody found out. The American people were so outraged by this that they flooded Congress with emails and phone calls and tweets, and Congress acted. This Congress, in 3 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, it was a record. In 3 weeks, a bill passes. It sails through the Senate 99-0. President Obama signs it, and the bill says you can fire the top 400 senior executives at the VA. By the way, that's another structural reform we need. Actually, we need to hold people accountable for their performance. Isn't that a good idea? So, this bill gets passed. Now, unfortunately, the pressure abated. We all moved on. And so guess what happened? Nobody got fired. And 307,000 veterans died before they received health care. And the VA handed out $142 million in bonuses for superlative performance. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a level of ineptitude and corruption that we cannot settle for anymore. It is a stain on our nation's honor. And that is why the pressure has to be kept on. And it is why, for every single thing we have to get done, I am going to speak to the American people every single week. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 1 for yes, 2 for no. We as citizens have enormous power, but we must use it. Because when we don't use it, we lose it. So let us take it back now.
Thank you. It's been wonderful hearing what you've been talking about tonight, and I agree with lots of it. One area we haven't covered, though, is our military. And I'm not sure how many people know this, but in the last 24 to 36 hours, we've lost a special operations operator in Afghanistan, as well as some other men that have been wounded. And I want to know, as Commander-in-Chief, how you would handle the rules of engagement so that it would give our men the advantage.
Yeah. So let me answer your specific question first. If we put our brave men and women in harm's way, we have to let them win. But let me use your question to make some other important points. Number one, we have to have the strongest military on the face of the planet, and everyone has to know it, period. That means that we must value and respect and honor those who serve and those who have served. It is why the VA is such a stain on our honor, because you cannot ask people to serve when we do not care for those who have already served. I will bring back the warrior class. Warriors, the finest warriors of our generation, who were, too many of them, prematurely retired because they told this president something he did not want to hear. We have to invest in our military, which is another reason why it's so important we go to zero-based budgeting, so that we both spend less overall and have enough money to spend on the important things. But let me say, ladies and gentlemen, we are being reminded each and every day how dangerous the world is when we do not lead. There has been a lot of bad behavior around the world, and it has never been answered by this administration. Hillary Clinton famously asked, "What difference does it make how 4 Americans died in Benghazi?" Mrs. Clinton, let me tell you what difference it makes. When 4 Americans die in a purposeful terrorist attack, and there is no response. Worse, you stand up and lie about a video that doesn't represent the values of America, and there is no response. The signal to every adversary we have is open season. When Russia invades Ukraine and there is no response, what signal is sent? More bad behavior. When Syria crosses a red line and there is no response, what signal is sent? When North Korea, let's just pick them since they're launching hydrogen bombs underground. When North Korea attacks Sony Pictures in a cyber attack and there is no response, we get more bad behavior. When Iran launches 2 ballistic missiles in direct violation of an agreement that has just been signed and there is no response, we get more provocation. Let me tell you precisely what I will do. Number one, I will honor and value and respect and listen to our military men and women, and we will care for our veterans. Number two, I will send an unmistakable signal to the world on day one in the Oval Office, not a red reset button such as Hillary Clinton tried to use with Vladimir Putin, whom I have met, but a real signal. And I will send that signal by making 2 phone calls. Number one, to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu to reassure him we will stand with the state of Israel always. And that phone call is really important, ladies and gentlemen, because every ally we have, even our Arab allies who disagree with Israel strenuously, look at how we are treating Israel and they conclude, if that's how the United States treats Israel, then my friendship doesn't mean very much. And the second phone call I'm going to make is to the Supreme Leader of Iran. I don't know him. I doubt he much cares for me. And so he may not take my phone call, but he will get my message. And the message is this: New Deal. New Deal with the new president. Until you open every military, every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible for you to move money. We can do this. We don't need anyone's permission to do it. We will cut off their access to the global payment processing system, and I will say to every single bank that does business in Iran, you will not do business in the United States of America. We must cut off the money, hundreds of billions of dollars, the money is being used to finance terrorism, finance a military buildup, finance a nuclear capability, which is most definitely not peaceful. And with those 2 phone calls, every ally and every adversary in this world will know the United States of America is back in the leadership business. We have some candidates in this race. You know, Donald Trump's having a bromance with Vladimir Putin. This is a very dangerous thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very dangerous thing because Iran and Russia are allied in an unholy alliance, and they are both our adversaries. We cannot outsource leadership of the Middle East to Russia. And I will work with the allies in the region, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Kuwaitis, the Jordanians, the Bahrainis, the Emiratis, the Kurds. I know them all. I will work with those allies and we will deny ISIS their territory, their caliphate, and defeat them. There can be no doubt that this exceptional nation will lead, will respond, will retaliate when necessary. Not because we are trying to conquer territory, not because we are trying to start wars, but because when this nation does not lead, when we do not stand with our allies, when we do not confront our adversaries, the world becomes a very dangerous, very tragic place.
You're a doer and you're going to make things happen. The question I have comes out of the situation where our state has a very serious drug addiction problem. Earlier in the week, you were at a seminar, and I really appreciated your answer to a question that was presented about how to solve it. You were the only candidate that said it's going to take money to solve the problem. My question is, how would you come up with that money, and how would you use it? It's very important to us.
So first, this issue hits very close to home for me because my husband Frank and I buried our younger daughter Lori in 2009 to the demons of addiction. So I understand. We have to have resources and money to put into community-based drug prevention and treatment programs that work. And there are programs here that work in New Hampshire, but they don't have enough resources. You see, it goes all the way back to how the government spends money. My goal, honestly, is to push as much money, as much responsibility, as much power outside of Washington and to the states as possible. Because I know, on this issue in particular, I know that when you have somebody thousands of miles away trying to figure out how to solve the problem, you're never going to solve the problem. You need a community-based program where people collaborate together and people actually care. So, we're going to get resources by stopping the spending in Washington that isn't making any difference. What's the second thing we have to do? Now, here's something the federal government actually can do. We have to actually undertake criminal justice reform. This is a place where there's bipartisan agreement, actually. When you criminalize drug abuse, you're not helping people. I mean, I can remember standing in front of a judge in a courtroom, pleading with him not to send Lori back to jail because I knew it wouldn't help her. That judge's hands were tied. But we now have the highest incarceration rates in the world. And more than half the people in jail are suffering from a disease of addiction, and we're not helping them by criminalizing them. And there are a lot of programs that work to take people out of jails and give them jobs and training and treatment and support. The federal government can do that. We can undertake criminal justice reform. And finally, we need to relook at HIPAA laws. HIPAA laws were designed to protect people's privacy, but what they've become instead is a way of isolating people from people who care about them. I can remember desperately, addicts game the system. If you're an addict, our daughter was an alcoholic and she abused prescription drugs. It's a pretty common story, unfortunately. And addicts get really smart. They game the system. And I remember desperately trying to track down all the different doctors she was going to, and they wouldn't talk to me because of HIPAA. So she got more and more isolated, and finally I remember finding one doctor towards the end of her life who said to me, "I cannot talk to you, but I can listen to you. Tell me what I need to know." So, the federal government needs to provide enough resources to the states to have these programs that work. The federal government needs to undertake criminal justice reform. The federal government needs to undertake a review of laws that aren't helping people. They're isolating people. And we need to have honesty about this problem. And that's why I spoke out about our daughter. Not because it's easy for me to do, it's not. But because I don't want any parent, any family member, any friend who's experiencing the scourge of addiction in their lives to feel ashamed. I want them to stand up and recognize that all of us know what this is about and we can solve this problem too. One more question. Okay, yes sir, you're it.
Okay. My question is on the country's budget deficit. Okay, it's going to be $20 trillion, very, very short. We had the Republican Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell leave the Congress recently to pass a budget that everyone in the government thought was great, yet it's increased further the budget deficit. And everybody up there in Washington thought it was fantastic. My question to you then is what specifically will you do to get both the Republicans and the Democrats together to pass some kind of a sane budget so that we can reduce this silly deficit and hopefully less reliant on the Chinese to give us the money that they're loaning to us?
It's a great question, sir. So first, isn't it frustrating? We elect historic majorities to the House. We restore a Republican majority to the Senate. First thing that passes increases the deficit. Wow, I think you're proving my point. Politicians kind of say what they need to say, but then they do something else. What does it take to reduce debt and deficits? We know the answer to this. What's it take? Grow the economy, cut spending. Grow the economy, cut spending. Grow the economy, cut spending. That's it. That's all we can do. It is why I start with these two things. If we do the right things to grow the economy, and we cut spending in the right way, we reduce the deficit. So why is the first thing up here, reduce a 73,000-page tax code down to 3? Because that will help grow the economy. Why is the next thing on that list zero-based budgeting? Because the only way we can reduce spending is to be able to control every single dollar of government spending. And today we don't control any of it. Because once a government agency gets the money, they never get it back. Name me a single agency that hasn't grown. They all have. Grow the economy, cut spending. The only way we can cut spending and still have enough money to do the important things is to have every single dollar be examined. So any dollar can be cut, any dollar can be moved. How am I going to get that done? Press 1 for yes, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask this question week after week after week. You have enormous power. I will leverage it. Of course we have to reduce our deficits. It's chewing up our children's future. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, I have said several times today, all of our problems can be solved. Every single one of these problems has a solution. It's not going to be quick and easy. But I want to come back here to the Exeter Town Hall in January of 2018 and ask you how we're doing. Because you see, I want you to hold me accountable. Quick and easy is not the American way. We're an exceptional nation. Not perfect, but exceptional. We are exceptional because we believe in the value of every life and in the God-given gifts of every individual, regardless of their circumstances. We are exceptional because we know that power dispersed into the hands of the many is more just, more competent, wise, and compassionate than power concentrated in the hands of the few. I am counting on the common sense and good judgment of the American people, because we have the common sense and good judgment to understand that something is going terribly wrong in this country and that the system is not working anymore. I also have tremendous faith in the courage and the wisdom and the fortitude of the American people, and so I know that together we are going to have the courage and the fortitude to do what must be done. What must be done in 34 days is you must send me out of New Hampshire with the wind at my back. That is how this starts. So ladies and gentlemen, before I close tonight and talk with as many of you and take pictures if you like, I will warn you, here's the rule: 1 picture, 1 vote. We have one last question, I guess. Yes, ma'am.
Students are the future of America, and so how are you going to help students afford a higher education with the skyrocketing tuition rates, even without the federal, like the ridiculously high federal interest rates?
Okay. So, let me just start by saying once again that we got to get the federal government out of the higher education business. The federal government has taken over the student loan business. It's why your loans cost 4.5%, 4.5% to 6.5%. The government, the federal government, makes money off of every single student in this nation. Does that strike you as wrong? That's because it is wrong. And by the way, the federal government now has increased the expense of higher education by layering on rules and requirements. I've served on university boards. I know how much this costs. And then the government has gone on even further and said, you know what, we're going to tell you what kind of education you can apply these loans to. It has to be a 4-year college. It has to be an accredited college. We don't like that for-profit colleges. We're not really wild about 2-year technical degrees. The government is playing a role that limits your choices, increases your costs, and increases the amount of money you have to pay to take out a loan. So, by the way, Department of Education's grown bigger and bigger for every year for 40 years, and the quality and cost of education, cost goes up, quality goes down. I think it's pretty obvious what we're going to do. So ladies and gentlemen, I really must bring this to a close so I can shake some of your hands and take some pictures. Send me out of New Hampshire with the wind at my back. You have work to do in the next 34 days. Support me. Help me. Vote for me. Citizens, citizens, it is time. It is time to take our future back and our young people's future back. It's time to take our politics back. It's time to take our government back. Citizens, join me. Stand with me. It is time to take our country back.